Hello to you all. As you are an Irish interest genealogy group, I have centred this talk on some of my Irish ancestors on my mother, Deirdre Margaret Coxon, née Kelly's side, although there are other Irish ancestors that I haven't covered, for example, the Pattersons and the Elliots who joined families in Ireland. So this talk is about 15 minutes. There will be pictures and photos. And I will be touching on some important people in Auckland who you may have heard of. One in particular you'll certainly know. So John Patrick Slattery, known as Patrick, a Catholic, and my great-great-great-grandfather, was born around 1823 in Kilkenny, Ireland, before marrying his wife, Elizabeth, known as Eliza, at age 26 for both in Sussex. His father, Peter Slattery, is listed as a farmer, believed to work on big estates, with Patrick's mother as a housekeeper, Margaret Slattery, née Dee, in Ireland. Eliza Maria Painter, before she was married to Patrick Slattery, was born in Madras, India, around 1824, and her ancestors worked for the East India Company from as early as the 1780s. One as a lieutenant sapper in Bombay and another in clerical administration. Her maiden name, as you know, is Painter, and her mother's maiden name is Irvine. Most of these records about the East India Company were found online by searching the company's records, giving clear dates of employment and positions. David even searched marriage certificates over there for me. In 1841, aged 17, Eliza is now employed as one of two servants, the other aged 32, in a house in Finsbury, St. James, Clerkenwell, London, for Edward and Sarah Walker. No mention of Patrick Slattery is locatable in any English census in 1841, so perhaps he's still in Ireland. Then, looking at census records 10 years later in 1851, Patrick was listed as a police constable, and he and Eliza had a few very young children, namely Margaret and Eliza, aged 2 and 7 months respectively. Patrick's sister Margaret, aged 29, lived with the family at the time and is noted on the census record. The area they lived in was Wandsworth, near the Thames River, known for its Irish community, and this has clearly drawn them to live there given Patrick's Irish ancestry. The Irish Catholics were obviously a minority group at the time in England. Of interest, there happens to be a local Irish pub there, built in the 1850s, called the Unity, which served a large Irish community and is still frequented by the Irish. And a picture of that is right here, one of my many pictures. Don't know if Patrick ever went in there, but maybe to arrest someone. So that's the hotel. Okay, you got that. The Slatterys lived off Putney Bridge Road at 7 Elizabeth Place, Wandsworth, by the census in 1851, but they were soon to move to a newly built house in 1852 at 6 Mendip Road, Battersea, not that far away, where Patrick is now listed as a gardener by the 1861 census. It is interesting that Earl Spencer's estate, that's Lady Diana's ancestor, is at the end of the same Mendip Road. It had been sold off in parcels due to financial difficulties, and the Carters, who I found on the map, I'll show you that in a second, were running a horticultural business there, having bought into the estate in the 1830s. Earl Spencer was lord of the manor over the townships of Wandsworth and Battersea to adjacent areas. It may not be far-fetched to assume that Patrick might have worked there in his gardening capacity. So just to show you, we were looking at, this is the map. There's the Thames River, you can see running down here. They're living initially in Wandsworth off Putney Bridge Road here. Carter's had a business down here somewhere, but Spencer Parker's marked over here in Battersea. Now that's an important place because I'll talk about that. He's living in Mendip Road, and that's where one of their daughters, Marianne, is born, who's my ancestor. Right. So their children on the 1861 census are aged between 12 and 1. There are 5 children at this point, 4 girls and a boy. The eldest 4 are called scholars, so I assume they had some form of education. Margaret Slattery, Patrick's sister, is no longer with them. The children are called Margaret Maria, Eliza Harriet, Mary Ann, John Peter, Frances Therese, and later on Lucy Alice, with Mary Ann Slattery, the 3rd eldest, being my point of connection in the family tree. And page 3. It is claimed by my auntie Marilyn, née Kelly, who is still alive, that the Catholic Bishop Pompallier of New Zealand, who was originally from France, interviewed Patrick Slattery and his wife Eliza on one of his visits to England, with a view to employing Eliza as his housekeeper at his cottage, which still exists, and Patrick Slattery as his gardener, in the grounds of the current Pompallier Centre in New Street, Ponsonby, Auckland. This offer was most likely between the 17th of June 1859, when he left New Zealand, and when he returned to New Zealand on December 30th, 1860. So he was away for about 18 months, his most recent trip, before they arrived in Auckland. What may have happened is that he offered them employment then, but due to Frances Therese's later birth around 1860, the journey may have had to have been deferred till she was old enough to travel, and she was 4 when she was on the ship. It's an assumption. It is worthy of note that a sister of Mercy, Sister Josephine, called Mary Slattery, accompanied Pompallier from Ireland on another trip, along with a number of Sisters of Mercy in 1849 to the Pompallier Centre and stayed. They went via London. It wasn't called the Pompallier Centre at the time, but I'm just referring to it as that. So on October the 10th, 1864, the Slattery family came out to New Zealand from London on the Columbus, a small bark, with all their children, Margaret 16, Eliza 14, Mary Ann 11, John aged 10, and Frances aged 4. Unfortunately, John dies in 1865. Eliza Slattery has a baby, Lucy, in August or September 1865, and the records do not confirm which of those months it is. And Margaret, the oldest child, Lucy's sister, oh yes, and Margaret, the oldest child, Lucy's sister, who is Lucy's sister, gets married aged 17 in the same year, in Bishop Pompallier's private chapel, with him officiating and with her father's permission, which is all on our records. I have seen the chapel. It is still there in its original state. So here is a photo of my great-great-grandmother, Mary Ann Slattery, or as a teenager, so that's their daughter, who my Aunt Marilyn says is likely here in the process of being presented to Bishop Pompallier. She was born around 1853. He left New Zealand in 1868, so she could be 15 or 16. And there probably had to be a reason for a photo, as they were expensive to do at the time. So just don't bend that. So there's the photo of Mary Ann Slattery. You can see in the middle. I'll just try and get a good view of that. Can you see that okay? Yeah, she's got quite a big dress. It's her up there. Okay. Right. In 1865, Patrick Slattery has the occupation of greengrocer on records. so likely has his own patch on the grounds he's tending. In 1889, he is still employed as a gardener when he dies of natural causes while in his sleep and while employed by a hotel in Hamilton. His family are staying in Auckland at the time. He is 66. His widow, Eliza Slattery, dies in 1902, 13 years later. She is referred to as an identity in Auckland by the New Zealand Herald on her death. A notice in the paper. Mary Ann Slattery, aged 19, my great-great-grandmother married Thomas Kelly, born 1841, when he was 31, on the 21st of August 1872, at St. Patrick's Cathedral, and both had been living at separate addresses in Freeman's Bay for the last 9 years. No, clearly she was at home with her family. Thomas was born in Rathcoffey, County Kildare in Ireland, which is to the west of Dublin, and came out on the Caduceus, a roomy, fully rigged ship, on the 26th of March 1865 with his sister Margaret and brother Patrick Kelly. They were children of Peter Kelly and Sarah Owens in Ireland. His father was a plasterer. Thomas had been living above his shop in Wellington Street, Freeman's Bay, a business he would run with his brother James, who later arrived in New Zealand in 1875 as plasterers, and the business included the Gravats as the builders. Emmett Kelly, Thomas's son, later ran the financial side of the business. I do find mention of Thomas as a builder as well in documents. So I'll just show you where Rathcoffey is. Well, first of all, I'll just show you the ships because I've mentioned the ships. This is the ship that Mary Ann Slattery came out. The Slatterys came out on. That ship there, the Columbus, and this is the biggest ship that the Kellys came out of from Ireland. Okay, and this is where the Kellys came from. Rathcoffey, Dublin is over here, and Rathcoffey is up here. It's actually marked up there, and this is County Kildare. So, where did I get up to? Yeah. So I did find a mention of Thomas as a builder as well in documents. So Thomas built a 2-story brick house for Mary Ann in Simon Street called the Willows, next door or opposite to St. Paul's Anglican Church, which is near the upper Wellesley Street side of the city. Although my aunt claims he bought a church building, so I don't know, but both of them put it near both of them say it's near St. Paul's Anglican Church. Now, the family are there from at least 1877 because two of the children were born in Wellington Street, and the next births right through to the end of the 8 children are in Simon Street, nearly all of them. So they were there until 1890 at least, but Thomas becomes a widower in 1890, and he's found to be living in Newton by 1899. So I'll talk about Mary Ann and what happened to her a bit later. But first of all, I wanted to say that the buildings that their business worked on were the First Jewish Synagogue in Bowen Avenue, the Auckland Library, now the Auckland Art Gallery, Sintra, Simon Street, formerly Sir Arthur Myers, Mayor of Auckland's house, the current St. Benedict's Church, 1 St. Benedict's Street, Newton, the New Zealand Insurance Building, Queen Street, Monty Cecilia House, known as the Parr Homestead in Mount Roskill, built in 1879 for Auckland businessman James Williamson. And also, my mother used to tell me this, the plastering work in the High Court in Auckland, and Thomas actually did some of that, if not all of it. We have a picture. We have a few pictures. This was come to me through the records by my sister and aunt. So we've got the art gallery, which was formerly the library, and then down there we've got the mayor. So yeah, the Mayor of Auckland, Sir Arthur Myers, down the bottom there, and a little bit about him. And in another picture we've got Monte Cecilia House up the top, and down the bottom we've got Saint Benedict's before it was burnt down there, that one. And this one is the current Saint Benedict's. My parents actually got married in that particular church, and that's still the same church. They built the second one. There's information about that, which I won't read now. So quoting from something which gives a lot more detail and insight in our records, I found this quote. Thomas and Mary went to Mass at St. Benedict's Church in Upper Simon Street, driving a horse-drawn buggy. Thomas, sporting a full black beard, wore a silk-top hat, black swallow-tailed coat with a silver-topped walking stick. Mary in her long gown and bonnet. They used to turn a few heads. When Mary Ann Kelly died, her youngest child, Leonard, was only 3 years old. John Harold, another child, had to help with the upbringing of the younger ones in the family. Linda, the youngest daughter, took particular care of her 2 younger brothers. She had a special talent for dressmaking. She was always so happy to see her old father, Thomas. He would often bring her a piece of green hide leather to mend her children's shoes. So most of that is a quote. She actually married a Lanigan and settled in Birkenhead. Thomas in 1919, aged 79, and Mary Ann in 1890, aged 38, were buried in the Simon Street Cemetery. Thomas even building his own grave site because he said no one else could do a better job. And that's a quote. One comment I would like to make is that the Kellys had a lot to do with the setting up of St. Patrick's Cathedral in Auckland City, according to my mother. One of their children was Arnold Joseph Kelly, who I'm descended from, who fought in northwest France as a sapper in World War I after volunteering, with 5 children, to Annie Elliot, married to Annie Elliot, which he he's married to Annie Elliot, which he didn't have to do as far as the volunteering went in the war. His 6th child, Terry, was born after he came back from the war, and who was a fighter pilot navigator in Britain during World War II. I'll just show you a picture of Arnold. Can you bring it a bit closer? Right in front there. So you can see Arnold Kelly in his uniform. There's another picture. We got this from the library archives, was it, David?
It was archives museum.
Yeah, so it was readily available, and we got another photo of him standing upright in his uniform. So Terry's brother, Thomas Slattery Kelly, or Tom, was my grandfather, an electrician. They had a sister, Enid Tapsell, who wrote a history of Rotorua, who I once met, and Pat was a law professor, who I also met. There was also Jack and Arnold Wynne, as he was known. So thank you to my sister Melanie and Auntie Marilyn for providing and finding the documents that I worked from, for the continual chats with Marilyn, and for the photos which we will treasure. Thank you for listening to this previously untold story.